To begin 205, I first started by forking a Git repository in GitLab. I then moved on to having to clone it into Codio. When in Codio, I first got the code from GitLab and then I was able to clone it straight into my Codio account. After it was all into my Codio account, I then had to install Google App Engine. To do this, I went onto the terminal and typed in parts install Google App Engine. After everything was all installed and all my files were there, I then had to test it locally. After testing it, I then had to change two parameters to be able to view it in the local site. This enabled me to see that my website was working as it should. To speed up the testing, I then made an alias for the testing slide. I called the alias local, so then whenever I typed in local, it tested it, saving me a lot of time. After all the steps below, I then had to deploy it to the AppSpot server. To do this, I had to make sure the application identifiers on both the app.yaml file and the Google App Engine website were both the same. After this was confirmed, I could then upload it. Now that I've created many changes to the code clone from my GitLab account, I then had to commit these changes. To commit them locally, I first had to type git status followed by git add, and to commit them remotely, I had to type git push origin master. The reason for origin is because the remote repository GitLab has an alias called origin, and the branch we're working on is called master. Here I've created a new Google App Engine project, but this time using the launcher. This was a lot quicker process and allowed me to move forward much quicker. In this Google App Engine, I was creating a simple feedback form where users can input their views and submit them. Here we have a 404 method not allowed. This is because we do not have any defining post strings. To get rid of this error message, I then added the define.postStrings, which allows the user to add the data and then return it. And here we can also see that it also returns, hello, my name is Ramsay. This is the input data they are submitting. This shows that everything is working fine. As well as submitting it on the page for the user, I myself also want to see it in the log console. So to do this, we had to, in between the feedback and the self-response, we had to add login.info bracket feedback bracket. This allowed it to be then be stored on the log console, which I could then see. After the user has inputted the data, we want them to go to another website where they can see that they have submitted it properly. Now, as you can see on the bottom image, it will say your feedback has been submitted, thank you. This allows the user to know that input has been put in and they know it's finished. As well as the user knowing what message they put, I myself always wanted to know what they put, so I added a code in, which means it will send me an email of their input. On my website, I wanted to add security, so I decided that I was to create a login system. Instead of creating my own user account, I used Google's. As you can see, it has a simple login and logout feature. On this picture here, you can see that an error has occurred because they have not typed in a valid email. The code that makes this happen is all because of validation. The next step was to create a bookshop application where people can use a guest book, and it will also contain a library of books that users can view. To create a library of books, I first had to add a handler in the app.yaml file. The URL extension for the book images I'll be using is /pics, so then whenever a user does /pics and then 12.jpg for example, it will return the image that matches. As my website was very basic, I had to create it a little bit more stylish, so I decided to link a style sheet. I started off very basic to see if it worked, and once it had worked, I then moved on to more advanced design. Like before when I added handlers, I created a URL, but this time, as the ISBN of books is different each time, we put a star. This tells the application that whenever a URL book, which is /book, is inputted, whatever follows book is then displayed using the script from book.app. For example, if I use URL /1234567, it will return ISBN 1234567 as shown in the image on the slide. Now I have all the basic data for my website, I then need to create a separate layout. I did this by using Ginger 2. To begin, I first had to create a HTML template that will be used to display the book information in a much clearer way. I then also needed to add Ginger 2 to my libraries so it is able to run. After adding it to my libraries, I was then able to change the environment to Ginger 2. Shown here was my first data store, which is very poor. To be able to create the data store in the first place, I first had to create a form that users can complete, and after creating a form, I then needed to use the post and get method that will let users first input the information and then see the information when it was posted. As well as the input data being displayed on the screen, the user's information is also stored on a data store. From here we can create new entities, retrieve new entities, and also delete them. This is also known as CRUD, which is create, retrieve, update and delete. As I said, the previous one was very poor and only basic. I then moved on to creating a form that had more inputs and also displayed neatly on the browser. Above shows the original codes on the left and my updated code on the right, which my improvements are on. As mentioned before, I had made many improvements, and as you can see here, on the left was my old form and on the right was my new form. Like before, when you submit the data, it shows on the web page, and it also shows on the data store viewer, which I can then use. Thank you for watching my video.